Welcome to Words Apart. Two students of SOAS doing something incredible for their community, and specifically for their module, for their degree even. And I thought it would be great to have them in today and explain how they came about to doing that, and how now, being in their third year, what are the stages in which they came into creating this collective. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us
Thank
here.
you for having us.
I'm Maxine. I'm a third year law student here at SOAS, and along with my friend Nadia and another student who just graduated her master's, we've launched the programme Bridging the Gap. So we'd like to talk about that today.
Yeah, I'm Nadia, and I'm a third year social anthropology and law student here at SOAS. And yeah, I'm helping Maxine with her project Bridging the Gap. Yeah.
Amazing. And could you kind of explain what Bridging the Gap is, and what made you start it?
I was class rep in second year, which is effectively quite a ceremonial position, let me put it that way. You attend meetings, you listen in, occasionally you suggest that they rearrange the timetabling or something like that. But in one of the departmental meetings, we happened to overhear part of the faculty discussion about the racial attainment gap. And in short, for anybody who doesn't know what the issue is, it's a phenomena that sees Black and Asian students statistically achieving lower overall degree classifications and also having higher dropout rates. And as a Black woman and as a law student and somebody who has come open-minded, wanting just to learn and consume information and to share, it just really struck me how we're still not in a time or a space when you can have a fair shot at your education. Even in 2018, even in the UK, it's not as simple as just attending and working hard. There are still structural inequalities which affect some people far more than they affect other people. And more so many of us are so unaware of these issues that we can't even unify ourselves or fortify ourselves to be able to come against them. If we don't know the enemy we're fighting, there's no way that we can empower ourselves to overcome these obstacles. So as the class representatives, and then also with my dear friend Nadia, we effectively just had a lot of conversations and decided that something needed to be done. And it wasn't enough to have this information and to know this information for ourselves. We needed to find a way to empower other people, other students, and hopefully eventually even broader than that, to be aware of the issues, that they can prepare themselves and that they can know how to oppose this structural inequality, and that eventually, hopefully, we can get to the point where hopefully it won't exist one day for future generations. So what the project is called Bridging the Gap, a student collective. And we called it a student collective inspired by arts collective movements.
Yeah.
The idea is that we want the student voice to be at the centre of this project. It's about listening to what students want and listening to what skills, what resources, what contacts they have and they would like to share, what healing and support looks like for students. And so it's very much led by the student voice. It's in its infancy. It's very, very new. We started working on this in July, and it is very, very new, but I'm super psyched, very excited, engaged and passionate, and I think it has good potential.
Yeah. I was reading an article earlier today that was about where the racial attainment gap starts, and it was saying that it starts when kids have first started tested. So I think it is in year 2, before even their first set of SATs, they're tested on phonics or something in year 2. And that's when gaps start to show, you know.
Wow.
Black boys from the Caribbean are already underperforming compared to their white counterparts by key stage 2, and that just continues, and that gap doesn't ever close. And when we think about university, even especially university about like SOAS, which prides itself on having lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds, when you're allowing lots of people from different backgrounds in who might not necessarily speak English at home, so they don't have they don't have like the fluency or the kind of practice of using English to express themselves in classrooms and essays, when they've gone to schools in areas that aren't necessarily, you know, as pumped with resource, when they're not achieving as well, but SOAS puts such importance on having multiculturalism and diversity and representation, when SOAS is allowing people to come in but not providing anything to close that gap. So when you're allowing people who don't have the experience to come in and then compete and be judged next to people who've been, I don't know, privately educated or have gone to grammar schools or live in areas, you know, where parents give like big donations, and I think that's quite a lot of percentage of the people we have at SOAS.
It's huge. It's bigger than you think. SOAS prides himself on diversity, and it seems to be their sort of selling point. Yet the most people that I see, and I'm not saying that I'm not middle class and I'm not white, but I'm the people that I come across are so wealthy and from another world almost, and it's shocking to even think that SOAS is here being like, we're so diverse this, when you have like 2% of the population who actually make up probably a good 40% of
exactly EinE. And that small percentage of people we have like representing different ethnic backgrounds and different class backgrounds at SOAS, when they're being compared to people who've had a lot of privilege and who've had a lot of resource pumped into their education, that it's incomparable. And we're not giving, SOAS isn't providing, and our lecturers aren't providing, and there's no extra support for people who haven't been, you know, taught how to write essays from such a young age, who haven't been, you know, read to by their parents, who haven't had experience speaking, you know, like going to elocution lessons or having the privilege of going to debate clubs and stuff like that, the stuff that you have to pay for. When we're comparing these two people and marking them against each other, who's going to come out better? I think that it's awful that it's only started this year, that to my knowledge, the people who, you know, who've been disadvantaged up until now will continue to be disadvantaged here.
Yeah.
So just to provide some context as well, because everything Nadia is saying is so true, but sometimes we forget to give a round image of how this is operating. This is not a university-specific issue, it's a nationwide issue. As Nadia pointed out, I just want to reiterate, evidence shows that it starts as early as year 2. So it starts early, it continues, the gap grows. It's not necessarily just based on our university, this happens across the country. But we go here. And we go to a university that, again, as Nadia's already said, and as you know, you've said, prides itself on being multicultural, being diverse, being inclusive. And that's all well and good. And actually, it's a beautiful aspect of this university. I love that I go to school with people who have a completely different experience to me. I love that I can learn about what it's like to live somewhere else from somebody who knows that. But there must be this additional support. There has to be this consideration that the experience of going to SOAS is not the same for everybody. And so this project is starting at SOAS. It's starting in the SOAS Law Department, not because the Law Department has the biggest gap, but because the Law Department is where the conversation was first had that some of us were aware of, and so it's kind of started very organically. It's student led. We heard about the issue. We weren't happy with the issue. We were able to have some support from some phenomenal individuals in the law department, and so that's why it started there. But the hope is that it will spread to the university-wide, to the other departments, while remaining student-led, and then also hopefully to other universities eventually. And that's the dream for this project, that students will be empowered in different departments, in different courses, in different programs, different universities, to support themselves and to unify and just to support one another. We live in a time when we're very much surrounded by this idea of self-love and looking after yourself, and that's incredibly important, and this is not to negate that, it's incredibly important, but there's also much to be said about supporting one another and to have that collective love and that collective support. And this is what this project prides itself on and focuses on, us holding hands together, us unifying together, so that we can all support each other regardless of whether or not the inequality affects you. So this is another point. Even though this is for the benefit of students of colour, and we can talk about that term, let me say Black and Asian students, we very much invite white students to get involved. Why? Because this inequality is not just a black issue. We didn't create this problem. It's a social problem. And unless everybody gets involved and unless everybody cares enough to be active in opposing this inequality, nothing will change. So that's also something we've had a really, really interesting debates on in terms of like, how do we make sure that this is also inclusive for all students? Because we want everybody to be passionately involved in this.
Yeah.
I think that's important as well, because somewhere like SOAS, I think sometimes can make people feel scared of joining something because they feel like it's not inclusive, and that can be quite dangerous because you need allyship, you need people to hold together, and I completely agree with self-care, self-love. It's everywhere, and it's weird because at first you think of it and you're like, oh, this is great, now I can spend more time to make my own health better, and you're right, it is important, but where are we going to get if we're not actually supporting each other?
Absolutely. And even you've used another word that is so crucial, which is allyship, being allies to one another. And what this project has really made us sensitive to and made us actively talk about is, what does it mean to be an effective ally? That is something we need to talk about, specifically in this case, because this is for Black and Asian students. What do our white allies look like? How can you be supportive without taking up the space of Black voices or Asian voices, but while also being actively supportive and not performative in that role?
Exactly.
It can be very easy to be like, yeah, I support it, I want good things to happen, but actually, like, what does that look like in a proactive way? And that's something we're shaping and something we are engaging on, and it's really interesting and nuanced and quite complicated to define.
I think it's quite clear based on kind of the people who've been attending the events that Bridging the Gap has put on so far, and based on the way that people kind of give input in class and speak about different things. I think it's quite clear that lots of white students at SOAS haven't actually understood and conceptualized programs and initiatives like this, but also issues of racism that as people of color face at this university. I think that lots of people haven't internalized that and haven't internalized the fact that we're all responsible for creating an engaging and learning and safe university environment for all of us to live in, and racism isn't a Black issue, racism isn't an Asian issue, it's a white issue, really. And I think that it's really, really, really important that we get representation of white allies to come along to these events and listen to what Black and Asian students want from them, because that's where it starts. They need to be able to hear, because I understand, like, it might feel intimidating going to an event where you're the only white person there and not wanting to speak over and not wanting to come across as a white savior. I understand the complexity of that, but I also would really like to stress the importance of white allyship and the importance of taking responsibility and holding yourself accountable for the environments that you're in. Like, I had an issue last week with one of my colleagues, one of my schoolmates, using offensive language in the classroom, and I called them out on it, and I said, I don't think that's appropriate, but everyone else sat there and didn't say anything. And I think that experience kind of reflects the fact that people are happy to sit back and are happy because they think that I handled it well, and I did handle it well, but that's kind of like, it's not my responsibility to. I think that we need to make it clear, and everybody needs to understand it. In order to do that, people need to come to events and listen and contribute and talk, and we can have a conversation. It's important to have a conversation about what allyship is and how we can support, and how to mobilize yourself and use your privilege to be effective and cultivate change. Yeah,
absolutely. A big part of this discussion and a big part of what we've been dealing with is realizing that when individual situations occur, they happen in a context of a structural inequality. So what would happen is somebody would say to me, as a class rep and as someone who's doing this work, okay, so my lecturer used the N-word in class and it made me feel uncomfortable. And then when I went to report that, I was told that I should confront my lecturer. And I don't want to do that because that person is marking all of my papers. And that puts me in an uncomfortable position where I'm here for 3 or 4 years and I need to graduate. And whatever I get is going to dictate and be a part of my future job, my career, my opportunities. I also need references from these people. So I don't feel like I can be, quote, air quotes, be a problem or raise the issue for fear of being seen as somebody who's disruptive. But at the same time, we have to understand that when these statements are made and when issues occur to us on an individual level, this is part of a huge structural inequality, which is in the end oppressing all of us. So the situation that Nadia was just referring to, where she was the only person who stepped up, and then in a class of a lot of white faces, everyone was quiet, and then afterwards said, oh, you know, you handled it well. It's quite frankly not good enough. Because unless you are active in opposing the inequality, unless you are active in opposing what you know to be wrong, you are contributing to it.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that's...
And we speak a lot about anti-racism here. We speak about decolonising our minds. We speak about all of this, but in reality, what does that mean? That is completely meaningless unless people are being active. And the next week I went back and I said, you know, like I feel disappointed that no one said anything in this class. Like I feel like I could call it out because I myself I'm in a position of privilege. You know, I'm articulate. I'm half white. You know, I have all these different privileges, which makes me able to stand up and say this and not be scared of, you know, of coming across a certain way or being labelled a certain way or anything like that. But still, you didn't say anything, and people, you know, and a couple of people in the class were like, oh, I don't think this is the healthiest way to deal with I don't think censorship is the healthiest way to deal with this. You're being aggressive, you're being militant. Yeah, people were saying this to me. Yeah, and we spend so long here speaking about anti-racism. We spend so long here speaking about decolonisation, but that doesn't mean anything. And I don't want to hear people talk about it anymore. I'm sick of listening to people speak about it and make people feel better about it. You know, you're different. You know, you've read. You know, you go to SOAS. Like here, we're different. You're a different kind of white person. I'm sad that I continue to validate people when it comes down to it, they're not going to stand up for me. They're not going to stand up for anyone. You know, and that's
counterintuitive. I think you spend the whole time that we're all in third year now, and we spent the whole last 2 years just learning about so much. And like my first lecture was about colonization, like in every single topic that I did, and yet we still find people are able to go down to JCR, have a pint and talk about, the group of white people can talk about whatever they want, about something they learned about in their development lecture. But when it comes down to real life, I think no action's actually done.
Absolutely.
But I think part of that, and I want to give them credit for it, because I think part of that is that they don't know how to mobilise. Because people are scared, and rightly so. People don't want to, you know, be overbearing. People don't want to be the face and the voice of the struggle and of the fight. And I think that like part of this initiative is to discuss ways in which, you know, we can extend our hand and be like, this is what we want you to do, and this would be really helpful. And like and people came up to me after this tutorial and they were like, we're really happy, this must have been really difficult for you to come to the classroom and say, you know, that you felt disappointed and like we're really happy but we didn't want to talk. And I think that but also what's and I think that's part of what this initiative is trying to do. But also what's very disappointing is that we're not getting turnout from these white people. Where are you?
Where
are you? Really and truly, where are you? And there's two parts to this. Firstly, which you guys have talked about, is about not wanting to take up space. But there's a second element, which is that we conceptualize our understanding of colonialism, racism, historic oppression in a theoretical framework, in a historical framework. And we don't know how to apply that understanding of structural inequality to individual situations. So when your friend is being followed or looked at strangely on the street, it's like people can't relate to how that comes directly from that same structural inequality. When we go into a shop and I'm being followed around by a security guard, or my ID is looked at for longer, or I have to make myself physically smaller in the public sphere, in public spaces, because I have to do my hair a certain way because I don't want to be taken for this or for that, or I don't want certain assumptions to be made about my character. It's almost as though people struggle to associate that experience on an individual level from the structural inequality that they understand as a social issue, but in a historical setting.
And from an academic perspective, I think that's what's key. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Just that, you know, there's a disconnect between reading about things and intellectually understanding things and being able to express yourself within a classroom environment, and then being able to connect that to real life and like seeing and there's a distance. Academia comes with distance. You know, you have to take evaluative distance in order to be effective in your research. But when it comes down to real life, like people approach it with this distance. You know, people don't think, oh, that's happening to my friend. No, they think, no, that's happening to somebody, you know, like a long time ago or somewhere else,
or
like far away from me. This is something I read about. This isn't something that happens in real life. And I think it's that disconnect that is the crux of the situation here, you know.
Absolutely. And we were having a conversation the other day where we were just saying, you know, academia is so important, and academics have empowered us to have a vocabulary, to have confidence to be able to talk about these issues, and I'm very grateful for that. But that's not the end, that's the start.
Our job is not done. Your job is not done.
Job is not done at all. Ours or yours, whoever's listening.
Exactly,
None of our jobs are done. This is the start, and like this is how we're able to arm ourselves. This is how we're able to be inspired. This is how we're politicized. This is how we're interested.
This is how we're taken seriously.
We're addressing the racial attainment gap at university. We made it to university. We made it. We made it past year 2, then again at year 6, then again at GCSE for people who did it, then again at A-level or IB. We've got here now. But what about the people who didn't make it through the pupil to prisoner pipeline?
What about people who did
finish
badly in their second year primary school, and so, you know, odds stacked against them, streamed into bottom set, were never able to achieve, written off, never got GCSEs. What are they doing now? What about them? They don't have the you know, our words are the tools of the oppressor, you know. Our world is constructed through language, and we're lucky enough to have this language to use to navigate, but lots of people aren't, and it's very sad.
And that's what we're trying to get involved with. It's about empowering ourselves, empowering students, but empowering those who maybe don't have the privileges that we have even in this position. We recognise, honestly, that like the support of my parents, I can't even begin. That access to education that I've had up to this point, I can't even tell you. And I recognise how much privilege I've had in my own upbringing, that I want to share what I can and help other people who don't have those privileges just to have a fair shot. It's not too much to ask to have a fair shot at life, to have a fair shot at top quality education, to have a fair shot at achieving a degree, and a degree that can get you a job. It's crucial because these are minds, these are inspired people, and with the tools and with access, who knows what these people could achieve? These are futures.
Completely.
And we have no idea what those futures could be, and like how sad that we're losing so many.
It's easy to forget that school is something that isn't disconnected from our world. School isn't a bubble, you know, like teachers don't live at school. Teachers live in the world, you know, like teachers are people who have been socialized. Teachers, like we have, like I don't know if this is a real statistic, but the majority of primary school teachers that I had were white women, and white women exist in a world that, you know, that has marked black men as dangerous and scary. So white women who are teachers aren't separate from that. You know, white women have internalized this fear of black bodies. It's a fear. It's not anything, like it's not disdain, it's not hatred, but it's fear. And I think that when we think about that at school, we think about like what our white women teachers teaching little black boys, and like being scared of them and being scared of them and marking them, even though they're little children, marking them as aggressive, marking any kind of dissent to like, oh, I don't really want to do this, or, you know, oh, I can't be bothered with spelling today, which we all do, you know, we're kids, and we shouldn't be at school doing like reading from 5 years old, but that's something different. But I don't think we should be. But you know, and lots of kids are not going to want to do that, but it's the black kids who are marked as aggressive or marked as problem. They're streamlined into, they're put in isolation, or they're marked as special ed, or they're marked as, you know, like aggressive or with learning difficulties, and that never leaves. That's something that you internalize, and that it loops around. It loops. You internalize it. You're marked as something. You internalize that, and your behavior will consistently reach that standard for the rest of your life, and that is crazy. It's mind-blowing. It's heartbreaking. It's upsetting.
Just to illustrate that point, just for a visual representation of this, what Nadia is saying is absolutely true. And the first time I saw it visually, I was in first year, and I was on the tube, and I get on the tube now, and there was a gap. I was sitting down, there was a gap, and then there was an Asian man sitting down, and he had his elbows on the little armrest, and he was chilling. I think he was reading a newspaper, minding his business. Lovely, cool. A white lady sits down, she walks onto the tube, then she sits in the chair in between us. As she sits down, instinctively, she puts her elbows right to where his was, And without even looking, this is from his peripheral vision, he immediately moved his arms put his arms on his knee and made his body small so she could take up the space of where he was. Neither of them looked at each other in that whole interaction. Instinctively, his instinct was to make his physical size smaller so she could have the space. That is the level that so many Black and Asian people, including myself, the level of consideration that we put into our every movement that people don't even have to conceptualize. They don't even realise we're doing it a lot of the time. And why to this day do we still feel like we have to?
And why to this day does white feminism still talk about white women having the no space in society? Why is our feminism, and maybe this is going off topic a bit, but why does our feminism not include the fact that Black bodies are marked as dangerous, and specifically Black male bodies and Asian male, not just Black bodies, but Asian male bodies are marked, and we have this idea as like the brown man or the Black man as the aggressor, the terrorist, the violent, the scary, the fearful, and feminism isn't including that, and that's why feminism is irrelevant. Feminism has its roots in racism, and that's why it's irrelevant
to a lot of our experiences. And
because it's irrelevant to our experiences, it's irrelevant full stop as far as I'm concerned.
Polarising, I love it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
It's all right.
That was really incredible. Thank you
so
guys.
much.
Good luck
Thank
with
you for
everything.
Thank you.
We'll put a link and everything on the
Lovely.
site. So
Thank you
yeah,
so much.
no
Thank you for having
worries.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye.
I'm here today with Abby. She's the president and founder of Equality in Engineering Society. And she's here today to talk about her experience and her role and what it entails. So welcome. I guess the first question I want to ask is, what made you decide to do this? I mean, to actually found this society?
So when I first started studying engineering, I guess me and my other female peers felt the same way. We all felt quite intimidated in lab groups. We felt like we couldn't necessarily work with the guys on our course when they were sort of sitting together and studying. And we didn't really want girls coming in the next year to feel the same way. So we decided to start up this society called Equality in Engineering, with aims to try and integrate the different year groups at Sussex and sort of make the other girls feel welcome and give them a sense of community.
And what do you think, when you first went into those classes, did you really feel outnumbered? And was it something which was inequality in what sense? Was it just gender? Was there other minorities in the classrooms?
Yeah, so I guess it was mainly with gender. I mean, there's about 10% of the class were female and the rest were male. So it was very noticeable if you came into the class and you could just see that there were just not as many girls. But I guess, yes, there are also aspects of inequalities within engineering, and it is quite clear that there aren't as many minorities studying engineering either. So I guess kind of being an ethnic minority and a female, you kind of feel it a bit more.
And what are some of the goals that you are trying to aim with the society, and what are some of the impacts that you have had already or that you're trying to have in the future?
Right, so with the society, we're starting off by trying to create an awareness of the issue. So it's kind of ignored, and I feel like people who are studying engineering and aren't part of that minority sometimes deny that there's a problem with it. They're not quite clear on what the causes are, and sometimes come up with comments such as maybe girls or maybe coloured people just don't want to study engineering. And I guess once we've sort of addressed that, we're going to start taking it further by sort of helping the wider community and starting off at younger ages to sort of tackle media problems, stopping girls and people of minorities from studying engineering in the UK.
I think it's amazing what you're doing, because I think it's something that you can also see even something in secondary school, even when you're studying maths. It was quite hard because I was in an all-girls school, and it was something that we weren't pushed to do. We weren't pushed to do maths, we were pushed towards humanities, which is crazy because so many of us actually really enjoyed maths. And then as soon as I went to Queen's Park, which is school we went to together, which was mixed, I realised that there was so much more of a concentration and focus on other subjects and science subjects and math subject. And I guess it was because it was a mixed school, but also it just shocked me how much we weren't pushed in the all-girls school. And I mean, in terms of your personal experience, did you ever encounter people saying comments to you when you were in class? Was there ever instances when you really felt that you were being excluded as in the classroom?
Well, yes. I mean, taking it back to school, when I was in my A-level physics class, I was the only girl, and I was also the only black person in my class. And I remember walking in a bit late where the guys were talking about some sort of software, new like computer software that one of them downloaded on their PCs. And I walked in and I said, "Oh, what are you guys talking about?" And then the boy replied to me, "You wouldn't know what we're talking about, but I bet you could name all the Kardashians." And I kind of was really shocked that someone would actually feel confident in saying that. I mean, it's a good thing the teacher told them off. But yeah, it just didn't really make sense as to why they'd feel to say that.
Yeah, it just makes it really clear how much it shows that women are not taught to go into science subjects. And I think engineering is a big one, because I know a lot of people went to Imperial, and I know which most of them were boys, like EinE, for example, and he says that there's barely any girls, and that I think girls only do biology, and in all the other ones there's probably about 2 or 3 per class, which is crazy. And I mean, you would expect university to be much more diverse. So I think it's amazing what you're doing. And do you think it's something that could be even spread even more in other universities across the UK? And do you think what are the other women on the course saying? Are they also really happy about this? And
yeah, so I think it's definitely made a difference towards the girls in the course. I feel like a lot of the girls feel a lot more comfortable now with the society being there. I feel like it has worked in terms of changing the minds of some of our male peers who may have previously been guilty of feeling a certain way. I feel like it has allowed us to sort of gain that respect from our male peers. They sort of do, give us credit now, and kind of they have shown that they've acknowledged that the issue does exist. In terms of girls from other year groups as well, they said that they feel a lot more comfortable coming and asking members of the EinE society, EinE is Equality and Engineering, society, for help with their work, just because they feel like they know it's a safe environment where they won't be judged. So yeah, I feel like it has made an impact.
That's great. Now, I think it's really amazing, and I think it should be something which you should even have gone down into like school, in secondary school. And so you're leaving next year so I mean, I guess we haven't really done an introduction, so maybe I guess I'll say, Abby and I went to school together. I was just in the year above her, in Queen's Park. It was a state school, a lot of local community type school, but yeah, what have you done since you've left?
Yeah, so since I've left Queen's Park, I started at the University of Sussex in 2016, where I began my first year of mechanical engineering. I am actually on the integrated master's course, but I still haven't decided whether I'm going to stay or maybe move around for an MSc or a PhD. But since joining Sussex, I formed a society called EinE, which stands for Equality in Engineering, with aims to address the diversity deficit within engineering. So far, we've had guest speaker events from industry such as Arup, the iMechie, Formula Student, and so on. We are currently advising Santander universities on how to tackle the diversity deficit within engineering and what they can do to improve on it.